What's up, Jooba people? Today I quickly want to show you how to create cool chord shapes. Because sometimes we get bored of the ones we play. We're like, oh, I'm tired of playing, yeah. Normal shapes, and I want to, come up with some interesting stuff. Anyway, so some of that sounded good, some of that not so good, but it was shapes that I came up with, a lot of it on the fly, and that I've come up with in the past on the fly. And I'm going to show you how to do that, so that you're not stuck in playing the same chords ever. That if you sit down and practice, you can say, okay, let me take 5 minutes and try to come up with some new chord shapes. Now, there's 3 things that are mainly the way that I use to come up with chord shapes, okay? And it's just in these 3 ways that you can come up with an infinite selection of chord shapes. And the first one is to omit notes. So for instance, if I'm playing, let's do bar chords for a little bit. If I'm doing a G bar chord, B minor, C. If I just say, okay, let me see all these notes, and let me just take out some of them. Let me just do like these 2. That's got a certain sound. What if I take these 2 and just add that note? Ooh, that's pretty nice. Now my hand has to change to adjust because it's a little difficult like that. Or I could say, okay, let's take these 2 from the bar chord and this one. Okay, now I'm going to go to the third point there. You get the idea of how omitting notes really gives you a nice sound. I mean, you can apply it on a basic level, let's say on the key of C, on, let's take capo 4-3. Let's play in the key of C, and then just instead of playing your normal big chords, let's just simplify it by just taking two notes from each chord. There you come up with good shapes. And what happens when you omit notes, you have fingers available, and then you could do riffs in between, or at least start to kind of think in that direction. Okay, the other one is, the third point is borrowing notes. Now borrowing notes is very interesting. It's one of my favorite things to do. Now let's stay in the key of C, and I'm going to borrow notes from, let's say, the G chord. So the G chord you can play like this. So it's got these 3 open strings and that one. So I'm going to play the C chord and then borrow from that chord. I mean, that open B string comes from my G chord. D as well. Dust in the wind. Can let the A minor also borrow from there. If the F borrows from G, it's going to sound really interesting. So I'll play the F. Ooh. Now, how did I know to add my pinky there? Well, that note is just an open B string. Part of a G chord. So now I'm playing G and I'm borrowing from the C chord. It's just, I mean, once you just have that idea in your head settled, you can borrow notes from other chords. It's like, wow, okay. I made a few notes here of creative ways to borrow. So the one is borrowing notes from other chords. You can choose, you can choose to borrow high notes from other chords. So high notes. And medium notes, mid notes, I guess, bass notes. So, for instance, I could say, okay, let's play in the key of A. That's not so common. Let's play in the key of D. Now, if I play the G chord, I can go to those notes from the D chord, like these. This I can even play a D chord and with a G in the bass. That note is not in an E minor, but it sounds really nice. It's from the D chord. So I can borrow the high notes. I can borrow the mid notes. So I can think of, okay, so this note is kind of mid and this one. So this one's part of D and this one's part of A. Let's go to G. So beautiful. Just everything you can do with the middle notes. It also works really nice in the key of G, like here. So this is a D chord, but with a G note inside of it. So it's like D with a D. Works nice. So just thinking of, let's see what we can find in the middle frequency range, what we can add. And then, what was one thing else? Oh, the bass notes. So borrowing bass notes from other chords. So that kind of technically takes you into, you know, inversions and that kind of thing, like D over F sharp. But not really, because, so for instance, I say D, and then I'm gonna borrow G's bass note, which is G. Ooh, how cool does that sound? I mean, this technically changes the chord to a G major 9 chord, but you don't really have to know that in order to be creative. So I mean, you could play this chord and just think of it as a D with a G in the bass, or just think of it as a D with a B in the bass. Oh, sorry. Sky Full of Stars, for those who were wondering. Okay, but this is just think of these, just write it down, omit and borrow. Then pedal tones is the last one I want to work on, pedal tones. Now that's how keeping notes, some notes in the chord consistent. Piano players do this all the time. Some notes consistent throughout all the chord changes. So if you're in the key of E, you're very familiar with this. So the pedal tones here are the bottom 2 strings. Even as you change chords, those notes stay the same. And it gives you a nice glue within your chord progression. So listen. Same thing happens when you're in the key of G. These 2 notes act the same. Now you could get creative with it. Maybe it's these 2 this time. Nice when the pedal tones change a little bit sometimes. Alright, you could do the same in the key of C. Instead of going C, F, you could go take these 2. Sometimes you're going to want to feel to change it, but it can say, okay, let me try to play the other chords while keeping these 2 notes consistent. So, for instance, in the key of A, I can do something like this. Do pedal tones in the bass frequency as well. Let's take the key of E minor. Keep the bass the same and just change the bottom chords. Technically the chord is changing. It's E minor, then it's like E minor 9. But you don't have to think of it that way. You can just think of one bass note, different chords. That's interesting, eh? Let's do it in E major. If you omit notes from the chords, so let's say I'm taking a B, and I'm just playing these 2 from the B, and these 2 from A, these 2 from G sharp minor, and these 2 from F sharp minor, then I get this. It's a nice vamp thing. Didn't work out that well, but you get the idea. Omit notes, get pedal tones, and borrow notes. Write that down on a sticky note and use that when you jam next time. Hey, cheers, guys. Have a nice day. Bye. Is this focusing working? Yeah, it is actually. Nice new camera. It's a very small. It's a webcam actually.